every time you have something to say, think to yourself, why should they care? And answer that question. Why should they care? If you change this one thing, you will communicate better. Nearly every single person who I've been on stage with, who I've had on a panel discussion, who I've interviewed for the media, does this. They speak from their perspective and not the perspective of the audience, the client, the people who they want to get a yes from. So what do I mean by this? Well, you see, the thing is this, because we're human, we are loaded with our perspective, what's important to us, what we believe is true, what we believe people must know, what we have to get across, all these things that are ultimately our perspective, what we want to do, want to get across, want to share. But the thing is that you're speaking to other people, right? And they have their perspective. So their perspective isn't going to be what you want, it's going to be what they want. And that's why I say I is for interest, not inform. Let this be your communicating norm. Okay, I is for interest, then inform. Feel better? You see, this is the big deal. If you don't get people's interest, you're lost. That's it. It's game over. Nobody's listening. Even if you're saying all the right things for you, you're getting across your key messages, all the wonderful things about your product, all the things that your little thing can do or you can do. But do they care? Do the people who you are reaching out to, who you want to get a yes from, do they care? Let me say this differently. Ask yourself, why should they care, right? So every time you have something important to say, every time you have something to say, think to yourself, who am I speaking to? Why should they care? And answer that question. Why should they care? And to answer it, you really do need to start drilling down into their perspective. So what do we mean by their perspective? Well, it's the things that are important to them. Okay, so we're people. What's important to us? Well, things that are painful, so a problem that you're solving, and things that are pleasurable, give us pleasure. So pain and pleasure are the two things that you want to speak to. You want to speak to their pain, their pleasure. If it's a client, it's a problem that you're solving. If it's your child, again, it's acknowledging where they're at, right? If you do this, bing, things change immediately because, one, you have bothered to find out what is important to them. They will appreciate this. There's a little mental logbook that'll go tick. Now, sometimes you need to split your ask. So you need to do the acknowledge interest first, and then another time the inform or your ask. But really that's the flow of it. The flow of it must be, you have to pique the interest, I is for interest, then once you have their interest, you can inform them. And guess what? Even if you don't get the chance to inform them, now when I say this, people think that this is the biggest disaster for them because they didn't get to say the big thing, the big news, that didn't get to share their key messages. Wait a minute. If you have been able to interest people in what you're doing, what you're saying, in you, in your company, in your product, if you just get to interest people, they will go off and inform themselves. They'll do a Google search. They'll find out more about this thing that can help them. And the utopia really is when they get in touch with you and they say, I heard you speak at this thing and I want to ask you about your product, your process, your company. How amazing is that? So if you're going to change this one thing about how you approach public-facing events, speaking, communicating, pitching, let it be this. Speak to their perspective. Speak from their perspective. Find out what the perspective of your client, your audience, your stakeholder is. And start there. The rest will flow. Good luck. If you want to find out more about how to communicate and influence, then hit subscribe. And there are other videos around here where you can take the next step to communicating with influence. And guess what? It's the same principles, the same communicating principles apply whether you're speaking to the media, on stage, to a client, or to your child. I'll see you next time. Bye.